When I was 25, I took a solo trip to Rio de Janeiro. My favorite DJ was performing that weekend, and I had always wanted to visit. I had traveled alone many times before without any issues. Airbnbs in the area were expensive, especially within the city, so I booked a comfortable, modern one-floor house a little outside the city. After landing on Friday, I unpacked, grabbed dinner, and headed to the rooftop venue where the DJ was performing. Everything went smoothly that first day, and I even met some great people at the venue: James, Ethan, and Jess. Ethan and Jess were a couple, while James seemed to be third-wheeling on their trip. The next day I met up with them again, and we spent time sightseeing, visiting Christ the Redeemer, Sugarloaf Mountain, and the beaches. Unfortunately, they had tickets to another show that night that I couldn't attend, so I was back to exploring on my own. That was fine with me. I found plenty to do until I got hungry and decided to head back toward my Airbnb, stopping at a small restaurant along the way. I could speak a little Portuguese, but wasn't fluent, so I preferred places where English was spoken. This restaurant had English on the menu outside, so I went in. It was dimly lit, long and narrow, with only a few other patrons sitting toward the back. The only other person dining alone was a man around 50, sitting at a table near mine. The waiter initially spoke Portuguese, but I asked if he spoke English, and he responded yes. As I ordered, I noticed the man watching me. It was unsettling. When the waiter left, the man commented in English with a Portuguese accent that my Portuguese sounded good. I thanked him, but he continued speaking to me, switching between English and Portuguese, as if giving me a language lesson. He probably thought he was being charming, but it was annoying and unsettling. I tried to avoid conversation by looking at my phone, but he kept talking, asking where I was from, why I was in Rio, what I had done that day, and where I was staying. I lied and said I was with a friend. Then, he told me I sounded sexy speaking Portuguese. That comment made my skin crawl. I hoped he would leave soon, but when his food arrived, I knew I'd be stuck near him for a while. My food came quickly, a pork stew dish. The man asked how it was, and I gave a brief response. Thankfully, he spoke less while eating. I ate as fast as I could and immediately asked for the check. Frustratingly, he did the same, despite not finishing his meal. Once I paid, I quickly left, barely acknowledging his goodbye. It was dark now, and the streets were quieter. As I walked, I stopped at an intersection and saw the man across the street. He was looking at me, but quickly turned away. Maybe he was just heading in the same direction. Still, I kept glancing back to see if he was following me, but I eventually lost sight of him. When I reached my Airbnb, I took one last look around and saw him at the end of the block, standing at the intersection, staring in my direction. My stomach dropped. He had followed me. I rushed inside, locked the door, and shut all the blinds. My heart was racing. He now knew where I was staying. Panicked, I called my dad, who told me to stay alert, ensure everything was locked, and maybe keep a knife nearby. It was Saturday night, and my flight wasn't until the next day, so I still wanted to go out. After a while, I called an Uber to a bar downtown and then to a house music event. I stayed for a couple of hours before returning to my Airbnb. When I got back, I let myself in, feeling a little buzzed and exhausted. I sat on the couch to relax when I suddenly noticed something off. The sound of the outside was coming through, and the blinds near the kitchen window were moving. The window was open. I had shut all the windows earlier because the air conditioning was running. My blood ran cold. I knew someone had been inside. I grabbed my phone and ran outside, hiding behind a bush across the street while I called the emergency number. My Portuguese was shaky, but I did my best to explain there was a break-in. Within minutes, the police arrived. One of the officers spoke some English, so I explained about the open window and how I had been followed. They entered the house, calling out in Portuguese. Moments later, they emerged, leading a man in handcuffs. It was him, the man from the restaurant. Seeing him arrested was the most shocking moment of my life. I felt relief, horror, and disbelief all at once. If I hadn't called the cops, if I had gone into the bedroom where he was probably hiding, I couldn't even bear to think about what might have happened. I left Brazil the next day and have never returned. I should have locked the windows as my dad suggested, but I never thought someone would actually climb through one. It was the holidays, and most of my friends were away, so I decided to look for a part-time job to earn a bit of money. After waiting for about a week, I finally got a call from a nearby restaurant asking me to come in for a trial shift. I had a fair bit of waitering experience, so I wasn't too surprised when the owner offered me the position. However, the place had a really creepy atmosphere. It was small, dimly lit, and every so often a terrible smell would circulate through the air. It wasn't somewhere I would have usually chosen, but I needed the money and kept reminding myself that I'd only be there until college started back up. One night, around 10 p.m., I was out front by myself, cleaning the cutlery while waiting for the last table to leave. It was a table of 4 big, rough-looking guys. In fact, if I had passed them on the street, I might have assumed they were homeless. After about half an hour, they finally got up to leave. I smiled as one of them came to the register to pay. "That's $42.50 altogether," I said. He immediately handed over a bunch of crinkled notes with a big grin on his face. Unfortunately, I had seen this kind of look before and braced myself for the cheesy pickup line. "You doing anything tonight, cutie?" he asked, leaning closer to the register. "Thank you, have a good night," I replied, making it clear I wasn't interested. He laughed and walked out the door, mumbling something under his breath. As soon as he was out of sight, I quickly cleared the dishes, cleaned down the area, and got changed out of my uniform. I waved goodbye to the last kitchen hand as I walked out the door and into the night. My house was only a couple of blocks away, so I walked every night to save gas. I had only been walking for about 5 minutes when a loud whistle startled me. I turned towards the sound and froze in fear. It was the same guy from the restaurant. He was on the opposite side of the street, signaling for me to come over with a large grin on his face. I hesitated before my instincts kicked in, and I started walking quickly away. My house was still about 10 minutes away, and I could feel him getting closer with every step. Terrifying thoughts raced through my mind, knowing very well how this could end. I turned the corner and broke into a sprint down the footpath. Tears welled in my eyes as I heard his loud footsteps following closely behind. I didn't dare look back out of fear, until suddenly, a firm hand grabbed my shoulder and yanked me backward. I turned to see the man. His face was red, and his grin had morphed into a furious expression. He put his finger to his lips. "Don't scream, or I'll cut you," he whispered. At that moment, I was ready to accept my fate, until a sudden burst of rage exploded inside me. I grabbed his face and dug my nails deep into his eyes. The man let out a loud, horrible noise as he clutched his face in pain. I took my chance and ran for it. I sprinted all the way back to my flat. My hands were shaking as I struggled to get the key into the door, but I managed to get inside. As soon as I shut the door, I collapsed onto the ground, exhausted and in tears. My roommates rushed down the stairs to see if I was okay. After walking me to the couch, I explained what had happened. They were all shocked but relieved that I had escaped. The next day, I called the restaurant and quit. It was a shame, really. The owners were so kind, and I didn't actually mind the job, but I was too terrified to return, knowing that man could be waiting for me. Now, I'm back at college, slowly recovering from the incident. Sometimes, I still get nightmares just thinking about what could have happened if I hadn't fought back. I was 19 and strapped for cash, so I temporarily took a second job as a waitress at a diner. It was open until 3 a.m. on weeknights and 24 hours on the weekends. On weekends, the place was always packed with drunk kids coming in after the bars closed. During the week, most late-night customers were people working overnight shifts or just getting off work. I worked the overnight shifts twice a week, any more than that, and I probably would have passed out from exhaustion. After 10 p.m. on weekdays, I was the only server since there weren't many customers, especially later in the night. One night, a large man came in alone around 1 a.m. At the time, there was only one other customer in the restaurant. I believe I seated him. Right away, he started talking to me in a flirtatious way. It was always the older, unattractive ones who were the most flirty. I had to deal with it with a smile, though, since I basically worked for tips. He ordered a burger and a milkshake and told me his name was Trevor. Throughout his meal, he kept staring at me from across the diner while I sat, scrolling through my phone. By the time he finished eating, he was the only customer left. He called me over by name to bring the check. After he left, I went to clean his table and collect my tip. Along with $5, he had left his number and a winking face drawn on the bill. Gross. I crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash. I thought that was the end of Trevor and me, but it wasn't. A few nights later, he showed up again, super late, when no one else was around. I greeted him and sat him at a table. This time, he greeted me with, "How's my favorite server doing tonight?" which was odd considering I had only served him once. He started another conversation with me, and though I was way too exhausted for it, I had to smile and entertain it. I figured maybe this time he'd tip better if I acted interested. That backfired because he mistook my friendliness for interest and invited me to go on his boat sometime. I played along and asked what kind of boat it was. He showed me a picture of this tiny little thing that could barely fit 2 people. I said, "Oh wow, my dad has a boat too." Looking back, I should have said boyfriend instead, but I was hoping for a good tip. Then he asked for my number. I told him, "I'm not allowed to give customers my number. I could get fired." He actually believed it, but when he left, he once again left his number on the bill. This time, he wrote, "I bet you were just shy last time. Don't be shy this time. You can text me. It'll be our little secret," followed by another winking face. Again, he only tipped $5. Not only was he a creep, but he didn't even tip well. I hoped I wouldn't see him again, but of course I did. The next week, he came in again. It had to be around 2 a.m., and it seemed like he always arrived right when the place emptied out, almost as if he were sitting in the parking lot waiting for me to be alone. This time, when he walked in, the first thing he said was, "You don't call, huh?" But he didn't say it with a smile. He said it with a serious face. I told him, "I'm really flattered, but I really can't text customers." He didn't say anything. He just turned around and walked out. Honestly, I was relieved. I just wanted him to stop coming in. The next day, while I was at my other job, I got a text from one of the other waitresses asking if I knew who the fat, bald guy was. I said, "Yeah, he's so creepy. Why?" She told me he had come in and asked for my full name. I asked if she gave it to him, and she said yes. I was honestly really upset. It made me so uncomfortable. She said he claimed he just wanted the name of the really amazing waitress from last night. Later that day, I got a text. It was from Trevor. "Hey, it's Trevor, your favorite customer. I know you said you can't give your number out, so I took it upon myself to get it myself. Now, you didn't break any rules, haha." I was at a loss for words. I blocked the number and hoped that would be the end of it. But later that week, after I got off work, I found an envelope tucked under my windshield wiper. I grabbed it and got into my car. Its contents were disturbing. It was a bunch of pictures of me at the diner, taken from the parking lot. But then the pictures got worse. There were photos of my apartment, pictures of me standing on my front deck, pictures of me unlocking my front door. The most disturbing one was a picture taken through my front window at night. I drove straight to the police precinct with the photos and reported everything. Between the pictures and the texts he had sent, there was enough evidence for the police to take action. A detective called Trevor and told him that if he contacted me again, it would be considered harassment and he would be arrested. That night, I stayed at my parents' house. I still quit the restaurant job just to be safe. My lease was up the next month anyway, so I moved to a new apartment. I didn't want to take any chances of that man finding me again. He was the first and only true stalker I've ever dealt with in my life.